Welcome back, YouTube. I'm Christian the Barbarian. This is a continued reading of A Method of Creation in Perfumery by Jean Carles, written in 1961, published in 1968. I got this hard copy in PDF form at perfumersapprentice.com if you want a hard copy. It's broken into basically 4 parts, 1, 2, 3A, and 3B. So if you missed part 1, go back on my channel, and I've got part 1 there. That way you can start from the beginning. Let's get into this. Accords with methylenone. To facilitate their work, I recommend proceeding as follows. Let us assume the study of all possible accords with the natural products listed under the base notes heading of the previously published table relating to a classification of products with respect to the evaporation rate is complete. The accords with synthetic or defined products can then be studied. With methylenone as a starting material, for example, one of the more important perfume ingredients, it will be advantageous to work systematically, taking into consideration where accords are concerned, various suitable combinations of the great variety of constituents offered to the perfumer's choice, such as are illustrated in the examples shown. The creation of accords. Methylenone plus natural products, examples being methylenone, vetiver, muscambret, etc. Methylenone plus natural products plus defined products, methylenone, vetiver, eugenol, musk ketone. Methylenone plus natural products plus defined products plus synthetic products, methylenone, absolute oak moss, acetavinol or vetiveryl acetate, sorry about that, apopanax 21, musk ketone. Methylenone plus natural products plus defined products plus synthetic products plus bases or specialties. Methylenone, absolute orange flowers, acetavinol, oleate 25, ethanol or selvione, etc. In these various accords, the proportions between products will vary according to our young perfumer's inspiration and originality, so that in an accord already set forth, 6 absolute oak moss, 3 ambergris, 3 vetiver bourbon, and 1 musk ketone might very well become 5 or 4 absolute oak moss, 3 or 2 ambergris, 4 or 6 vetiver bourbon, and 1 musk ketone. The same is true where selection of the product is concerned. When so desiring, the perfumer may vary his choice somewhat less systematically and use whatever materials appeal to his taste. Free scope is given to him in this respect, and there is no absolute rule to be followed in the search for accords, since any modifications deemed useful will serve to produce very characteristic novel notes. The olfactory evaluations of such working formulations will be affected desirably on evaporation because of their starting notes. Their starting notes might appear somewhat surprising due to the lack of a modifier product. The bottles containing these accords will be filed in boxes, and their labels will show the number corresponding to the formula. After completion and adequate selection of the accords, the student perfumer will advantageously practice olfactory evaluations of their constituents. This will prove the best possible olfactory training and will provide a constant checking means of the student's familiarity with perfumery raw materials. Thus, any research work undertaken will be greatly facilitated. As already stated, there are no miracles in perfumery, and the perfumer will never be able to identify the accord, absolute oak moss, methylenone, vetiver, muscambret, unless thoroughly trained to do so. Considerable and very rapid improvement of the student's know-how will follow, resulting in a wonderful aptitude for identifying the constituents of perfumes he wishes to study. Constant practice essential. Although fully aware of the difficult, monotonous work involved, I feel the long years devoted to it are absolutely necessary. In no other way can the creative perfumer expect to attain proficiency. Could a musician write a symphony without ever having practiced solfeggio, scales, harmony? It should be emphasized time and time again that olfactory studies alone will open the way to true mastery and hence to success. Should freakish chance play into your hand and make a sell success of some early attempt, do not believe by any means that you have become a master of your art. Emphatically not. Rest satisfied only when the day comes that you can boast of the number of successful creations to your credit and feel assured that many more will follow. All my colleagues have noted the self-complacency of some very green perfumers who have not yet created anything worthwhile and never will because they do not work. They take laboratory life easy, smelling strip close to the nose all day long, feeling entirely open to some miraculous, perpetual, elusive inspiration. Others are entirely lacking in imagination and never even try to create something of their own, bearing no resemblance whatsoever to perfumes already on the market. They restrict their efforts to the imitation of successful perfumes, with some not always happy modifications. They apparently delude themselves into the belief that they have created something bearing the mark of their personality. What a pity that the time of truly original creations, where the great craftsmen relentlessly pursued their search for novel notes, may seem a thing of the past. This deplorable state of affairs cannot be said to be specific to perfumery, since similar erring ways seem to have become the rule in music, where rank imitations are even more frequent. Young composers appear to seek inspiration from successful tunes, distorting them to suit their purpose, modifying their rhythm, and seem convinced that their amateur music will become as great a commercial success as the original. The same is true at present in our industry. It is in this respect that, in my opinion, there is actually no particular fashion in perfumery. It is the fact that perfumes with sales appeal derive, for the major part, from perfumes dating back 30 years or more, and still foremost in the bestseller list. It could very easily be demonstrated that many of the more recently successful perfumes fall into this category. Obviously, young perfumers with a good nose find it much easier to seek inspiration from some acknowledged good perfume than to devote themselves to the search for novel original notes. Creation and imitation. Let our future perfumers meditate upon the subject and discover the zest of true creative art. Means for such achievements have been made available to them. Let them persevere in their task in spite of disappointing results, even if such efforts may seem unrewarding at first. Perfume creating is far from easy, but what pride once they have created a perfume they can call entirely their own. Only then will they understand that it is better to be imitated than to imitate. There lies the sign of success. It should also be said that very few among the public at large are able to detect the similarity between copy and original perfume. This undoubtedly provides an excuse and encouragement for imitators. This is most unfortunate for French perfumery, an art so typical of our people and in which we can justifiably take some pride since it has greatly contributed to the worldwide reputation of our country. But this reputation is jeopardized by a lack of originality against which steps must be taken with a will for keeping off the beaten track. While our customers are largely responsible for the present state of affairs, always requesting X type or Y type perfume, it is up to us, however, to persuade them to abandon this policy and to turn to entirely new notes. Thus, the market will no longer be crowded with perfumes of more or less similar fragrance, but will at last offer new, original, sometimes disconcerting notes, maybe, but notes, which will renovate entirely this wonderful art of ours for the greatest benefit of French perfumery. This being understood, the task of our young perfumers should be facilitated. Therefore, I advise them once again to establish for each floral or fancy note a table corresponding to said note and keeping in tabular form the top notes, modifiers, and base notes compatible with the perfume they wish to create. Such tables are very valuable memoranda. Having undertaken a study of shipper notes in Part 1, I am now giving, as an example, a table relating to such notes. Although incomplete, it is illustrative of the method that can be used by students as a starting basis for a similar table of their own, established according to their personal tastes, since I have limited my own choice to substantially conventional materials. This table includes a number of accessory products, which will be used eventually for varying the shipper note, according to the inspiration of the student perfumer. When I mentioned accessory products, I referred to a wide variety of products from which can be selected the material which will usefully change the character of a basic accord, the constituents of which enter in high proportions in the overall perfume formulation, but which, owing to its character, cannot be used in large amounts. As is generally the case, there are exceptions to this rule, as previously illustrated. But no one would even consider formulating a basic accord proper that is an accord between constituents at concentrations of the same order of magnitude by using, for example, absolute oak moss in association with caraway, cascarilla, aldehyde C14, or galbanum. But when used in reasonable amounts, the latter products can, as the case may be, become extremely useful for the purpose of imparting a specific character to creations. As a matter of fact, most accessory products belong to the series of modifier products, except a number of materials such as celery, cistus, aldehyde C14, etc., that come under the base notes heading. To this table, any available specialties that are apt to impart interesting modifications may be added. These are ingredients or raw materials that are compatible with the Chypre. Under the top notes, it's sweet orange, bergamot, linalool acetate, geranyl acetate, rhodol acetate, geraniol, linalool, lemon, Bois de Rose. Under the modifiers, it's absolute rose, Bulgarian rose, geranium, neroli, petite grain, absolute civet in a 10% solution, absolute orange flowers, rhodol, rhodonol, penyl ethyl alcohol, penyl ethyl acetate, cinnamic alcohol, pine, maritime sylvester, styrax, coriander, argiol, ylangs, acacia, cinnamon, Ujet 133 or Invar, jasmine 1103, cloves, eugenol, isoeugenol, etc. Under the base notes, absolute oak moss, patchouli, vetiver and derivatives, acetaminol, sandalwood, absolute cistus colorless, ambergris 162b, amber liquid, methyl eugenol, olibanum, orris concrete, ionones, methyl ionones, clary sage, absolute ambrette, absolute jasmine, ambrette oil, musks, etc. Under the accessory products, it's caraway, galbanum, costus, juniper berries, laurel noble, angelica seeds, hyssop, aldehydes C9, 10, 11, 12, and 14, celery, etc. And under the bases or specialties, alphenol, Selvone or Corona, Bavardia 198, Corionol, Coeur de Russe, which I believe means Russian leather, 18-167, Daltonia 1096, tobacco flower, Arisia, Moose 32, Moose 1026, etc., Moose Sylvester, Sylvestre, Moose de Chypre, Moose Poivre, Moose JD Base, and Moose R. These are probably a lot of French words. I'm probably butchering them. And I'm not exactly sure what they mean, especially because this particular reading is from the 60s, and I believe there's been a lot of advancement in the aroma chemicals that we have nowadays than they had then. So some of these may not even be available because of their toxicity anymore. Obviously, you'd have to do your research before, even assuming they're available, before you could use them in anything safely. The chart continued on the next page. Pimenol 44 was the last one under the specialties. I believe it was the specialties. Let's see here. Yeah, bases or specialties. The table given above relates to conventional Chypre perfumes, but the utilizable constituents may be varied ad infinitum, provided the standard Chypre characteristics are maintained. It will be noted that coumarin was not mentioned among the base notes tabulated above. This is an intentional omission to prevent the student from wandering away from the Chypre note and creating a fougere type perfume. Lavender was omitted from the head notes for the same reason. While on the subject, it should be mentioned that students in perfumery are very seldom capable of explaining clearly the difference there is in the formulation of a conventional Chypre, fougere, foin, and trèfle notes. The chief characteristics of such notes are summarized below for the purpose of preventing potential errors. This is another chart here. Under Chypre, these would be compatible raw materials based on the style. Bergamot, sweet orange, rose, absolute oak moss, amber, miscellaneous musks. For the fougere, bergamot, lavender, geranium, absolute oak moss, vetiver, absolute tonka beans, coumarin. Foin, I'm probably not pronouncing that right either. Foin. I'm assuming that's a a style of fragrance that I'm unfamiliar with. But the ingredients that are compatible with it are bergamot, geranium, absolute oak moss, patchouli, amyl salicylate, and coumarin. And trefoil, assuming I'm pronouncing that correctly, bergamot, anisic aldehyde, eugenol, absolute oak moss, amyl salicylate, patchouli, musk ambret, and coumarin. It is apparent that the above working formulation is most incomplete, but it is a sound starting basis for the study of such notes and will give full scope to the student's imagination and fantasy. The distinction between the four notes being fully established, we shall proceed with our study of the shipper note. In the previously published paper, only a few simple accords were given with an absolute oak moss basis. For the purpose of facilitating research work, a number of accords selected by our own students are given by way of examples on the next page. Although they are not particularly outstanding, such accords will permit a better understanding of the procedure previously set forth and can be used as a starting basis for fancy shipper notes, since conventional shipper perfumes were already discussed. We shall proceed systematically as previously, successively studying accords with 2, 3, and 4 products, in addition to the artificial musk that cannot be dispensed within any shipper note. It will be readily apparent that some of the accords given in the table are economically impractical because of the high cost of the various absolutes, but they should be mentioned so that their effect can be studied. Quite obviously, such accords are endless, but many can be eliminated and the student's choice limited to those he considers really worthwhile. In the above examples, we have interrupted the illustration of the method with accords containing 4 products, but the study could be carried on with 5, 6, 7 products or more, with highly surprising and pleasant results. How should one proceed? As far as I'm concerned, I always carry out such tests volumetrically, in milliliters, using a graduated test tube. All products except the artificial musk being in 10% alcohol solution. Thus, I can work very rapidly. Since the musks used are not soluble at 10% concentration, they are used exceptionally in 1% alcohol solution. Thus, when actually testing the formulation indicating musk ketone 1 should read 10. This procedure permits very rapid evaluation of the olfactory character of an accord. This is another chart here, accords for fantasy shippers. I want to get up and show it to you, the camera. If I can get behind it here, give you an idea what it looks like, if it'll focus on there. So this will be best if you probably download the PDF and read through this. I might read a couple, but I don't think me reading the chart aloud will be beneficial at all. It'll probably be tedious at best. So it goes through a few things, simple accords with 2 products, and it gives you 8 absolute oak moss, 2 concrete ambret seeds, 1 musk ketone, and then it changes throughout there. And then it'll give you examples with 3 products. And I believe on the next page it goes to 4 products. Yeah, it ends up with 4 products. An example of that would be 3 absolute oak moss, 3 patchouli, 3 vetiver, 3 absolute jasmine, and 1 musk ketone. But it'd be best if you downloaded the PDF version and looked at the chart. If you're driving, like I said, I'm not going to read through all these because I don't think it would do any good. So let's continue. Space spray testing. How should the actual smelling test be carried out? Although such a question may seem quite bizarre, it is nevertheless most important. Above all, do not use a smelling strip. Why? Because when smelling a perfume or some accord from the smelling strip, one does not in the least obtain an even approximation of the true scent of the perfume. The following anecdote will explain why I abandoned the use of the smelling strip for appraising new perfumes. I happened to be visiting Lisbon some 30 years ago and was lunching out with our agent and his wife. I felt intrigued by the excellent scent of her perfume and finally asked for its name since I had no recollection of it. She laughed and answered, this was a very simple one of my latest creations I had given her husband during my last visit. Paradoxically, I had not recognized my own perfume, being unfamiliar with its true full scent since I had always appraised it from the smelling strip. This served to make me understand clearly that the smelling strip can in no way be used for affecting an overall evaluation of the perfume's true full scent. I became quite concerned with the problem, and when backing in Gras, inquired about the sales of the product I had just discovered, and found out the sales orders represented substantial amounts. From this time on, I gave up using smelling strips for the evaluation of my own creations and henceforth used vaporization. How should one vaporize a perfume undergoing olfactory evaluation? Many suitable devices are available, but I obtain the best results with a very simple, cheap spraying device of the type commonly used by artists for spraying a very thin coating of clear varnish on charcoal or sanguine drawings. Thus, the perfume is vaporized for 5 to 7 seconds in the center of a room, care being taken not to direct the perfume cloud onto the walls. The room has been closed, and the experimenter returns to it after 2 or 3 minutes and can then effect olfactory evaluation of the resulting scented atmosphere. The immediate and precise sensation produced by the character of the perfume, and especially by its fully developed scent, as it will be released under actual use conditions, is thus obtained. This achievement would not have been possible with a smelling strip. In addition to this significant advantage, the perfumer will gain precious time with such tests, in contrast with the long hours necessary for full development of the perfume on smelling strips, and which will have to elapse before a perfumer can properly appraise the main character of his new creation. Such vaporization produces the true, fully developed scent without any possible error and permits immediate rearrangement of working formulas. A large number of olfactory evaluations are thus made possible, in contrast to the slow results obtained with the smelling strip. I have found this procedure fully satisfactory for almost 35 years. On the other hand, it goes without saying that the smelling strip is indispensable and irreplaceable for the olfactory evaluation of perfumery brought materials. This means of carrying out olfactory evaluations also has another advantage. I found out that certain perfumes offered to a potential buyer were sometimes rejected when smelled from a smelling strip, whereas vaporization of the same perfumes resulted in a sale. I wish to insist that student perfumers carry out this experiment when evaluating their creations. Surprising results will probably ensue, and many will be disappointed by the perfumes they had rated as good when using a smelling strip and which appear rather indifferent on vaporization. But the contrary will also occur. Perfumes and sales appeal. It should always be kept in mind that it is the true, fully developed scent of a perfume which is responsible for its sales appeal, and which is the best of all advertising means for your creations. It is because of it that a woman purchases perfume. As a matter of fact, perfumes are not selected but adopted by women. Various reasons can be found for this attitude. One of the chief reasons a woman buys a specific perfume is because it is all the rage, being the latest creation of the fashionable courtier, and because, thus, she will be able to answer any inquiry with, "It is X's new perfume." But should no one react to her new perfume, should it be disregarded by her, her husband, her friends, or her hairdresser, then she will promptly disregard for good. If, in contrast, from the day of the purchase, all compliment her on her good taste and ask for the name of the perfume, she will feel flattered and will make it hers. Women will also adopt a perfume they have smelled on a friend, having been able to appreciate its scented trail, or a perfume which has long been held in high repute. I have seen women refuse a high-grade perfume offered to them by a salesgirl at the perfumery counter of a department store and return to purchase the same perfume a few minutes later. What are the reasons for such a change in opinion? They may have evaluated the perfume on opening the perfume bottle. This was a gross error, since they could only have smelled the very volatile top notes, which permitted in no way to detect the principal character of the perfume, and they remained ignorant of its fully developed scent. They may have evaluated the perfume by casting a drop onto their ungloved hand, just they would have tested a cream or lipstick, omitting to take into account the odor due to their skin or that imparted by the glove. This is too rapid evaluation carried out under poor conditions has not made possible the perception of the scent characteristic of the perfume. They have smelled the perfume on some friend, and this has settled their choice, having appreciated its true character, Such cases are very frequent. Limitations of panel testing. As a matter of fact, I have often remarked how incapable women was to pass judgment on the perfume. That sentence doesn't make sense to me. Anyway, let's continue. Early in my career, I used to make the gross mistake of giving samples of my newly created perfumes to women, chosen among the more fashionable and clever of my friends, and of requesting their advice on the olfactory value of my gift. As a result, I often had to listen to utterly senseless criticism. Faced by such incompetence, I decided to stop asking for advice on the value of my creations. I merely offered a bottle of my new perfume and quietly waited for any reactions that might come unsolicited. If, after a few days, nothing came of it, I decided my perfume was a frost and merely wrote it off. But if, on the contrary, as soon as the perfume was tried on, I was told, "My dear, this perfume is wonderful, sensational. They are all asking for its name," then I felt sure my perfume was good and could become a success. And 99 times out of 100, it was a success. This is the reason I'm entirely opposed to panel tests, which are so extensively used in the United States where perfume is to be evaluated. The panel tests, just as the smelling strip, should be used only for the evaluation of raw materials. My conclusion will be the following. Never ask a woman for her opinion on the perfume you have just created. She will feel embarrassed and you will leave yourself open to great disappointments. At the early stages of my career, I was full of great illusions and firmly believed all my wishes would come true. Far too often, I was sure of having created wonders, which in fact were nothing to speak of. The only sure guide is vaporization, which will provide true information on the olfactory value of perfumes. New horizons. I hope the few illustrative examples given above will help my young colleagues to find an answer to their questions and make them more eager to go on with their research without restricting their work to mere imitations, which will not help them progress rapidly in their chosen art of creative perfumery. I have set forth some of the discoveries I have made in the course of my long career. My young friends will arrive at the same discoveries by dint of hard work and olfactory research, and will, every time, feel elevated at finding new horizons for future creative work. Such discoveries will sustain their young enthusiasm, which will make of them excellent creative perfumers. I think there might have been some grammatical errors in this translation here, and it also makes it very difficult to read with these run-on sentences. But I hope it was valuable to you. I will soon upload part 3A and 3B when I have a chance. I'm probably going to break them in two parts as they are in the book, because I'm sure there is breaks in the lesson intentionally. That's why they broke it. Plus, it's fairly long, and to read it in one shot without having to do any editing, which I don't want to do, I'm just going to break it into two more parts. So it'll turn out as 4 parts in the end. But I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you find it useful. Stay tuned for part 3A and part 3B.